Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Very clearly, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yeah. Pleasure to be here, and apologies for a little bit of a Zoom issues that uh, it's very hard. Frankly, it's very hard to communicate what India's digital infrastructure journey for the last 12 years or so in about 10 minutes. So I'll attempt to cover a lot of things in 10 minutes and see where it goes. And I still want to give just a little bit of a time for question and answer. So India was at 17% of banking penetration in 2009. And it is important to understand, we've already had smartphones by then, right? In the world, internet was already nearly 15 years. But India was struggling to give bank accounts and bring people to formal banking systems, even in 2010. But we instead of taking 5 decades, so the study from Bureau of International Settlements in Basel in 2020, study showed that India would have normally taken 5 decades to provide bank accounts to more than 80% of the people. But India merely took actually about 7 or 8 years, actually less than a decade. So it's a very non-linear change India found in terms of providing bank accounts to everyone. At the same time, India also completely overhauled we are quite a welfare state. We have a lot of poor people and or vulnerable people, and government provides roughly about 70 to 80 billion US dollars every year as subsidies, pensions and fertilizer subsidy and scholarships, girl scholarships and so on, many subsidies program, both at the federal level and at the state levels. India completely reimagined how these subsidies would be given to people instead of a very old style subsidy regime, which was fraught with leakages, enormous leakages and middlemen taking away the money. India built, because everybody has a digital identity and because everybody has suddenly, for 6 years, 8 years, we gave bank accounts to everyone, we reimagined the possibility of subsidy going directly to the people. So India today runs world's largest direct cash transfer program. And we have already transferred $322 billion and ROI, because the entire India's digital India, the overall what we call India stack, India government has not spent more than about 2.2 billion US dollars. That's all we have spent in the last decade, all put together, just about $2.2 billion. But the ROI just from the federal system was $27 billion. So it's enormous savings from that. Not only savings, but enormous number of people, 860 million people to be precise, can actually receive money instantly in India. India also very interestingly found a complete transition from a 2G network with feature phone to a 4G network with smartphones. So we have about 800 million smartphones now, very large number of billion plus internet connections and phone connections. And India went from, in 2016, we were 1 GB a month per capita data consumption. And today we have 1 GB a day. So Indians consume 1 GB every day, and it just costs 0.17 cents. It's so cheap that Indians are consuming, and that's, and Indians are crazy about video, audio, and sports. So everyone is watching some of this as well. India also transformed cash economy to a heavily digital payment economy. And India laid this infrastructure that in 2016 called Unified Payment Interface. That saw enormous growth from 2016 to 2023, from zero transaction in 2016 to a 9.6 billion transaction last month in payment, real-time payments. And we do the largest real-time payments by volume far. China plus UK plus US all put together. India just very much created a non-linear leap in all these things: connectivity, identity, bank accounts, social protection schemes, and digital payments. We also changed the way logistics, and our entire country is connected through a single tax system, which was quite a change after 60 odd years of independence. It was quite, in one sense, shock for the whole country to go to one GST scheme. Entire country now on one GST. All invoices are digital today for India, and all our roadways, toll collection, tax collection, everything is electronic. So enormous B2B savings as happens. India also moved from paper-based transactions to paperless transactions. All our academic certificates, vaccine certificates, and various other credentials have actually gone digital. So we have our DigiLocker that allows us to store, show electronically verifiable credentials as we move in the country. Like driver's licenses, identity credentials, licenses, academic credentials, health credentials, and so on. And this went from, we launched in 2015, Prime Minister launched this as part of Digital India. Today we have 160 or 170 million users there. And interestingly, government has spent any money. The total spent from the government for this, the DigiLocker, is about $6 million US. That's it in the last 10 years. So it's not a money spending game. It is a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking to bring digital and innovation together. So if you look at government, our GDP grew quite well. As you always watch, our domestic economy is strong. But our tax collection grew faster than GDP. And that shows the formalization of an SME and large industry. Otherwise, they were fragmented, sort of informal way of managing. They're all being formalized. At the same time, even expenditure, revenue became better and expenditure became cleaner and less leak-proof. But the most brilliant thing India did is this is not about all government thing. Government was laying the digital infrastructure like a highway or a railroads or roadways in the physical world. In the digital world, like internet and GSM, as we see, protocols and standards driving private innovation. So India also saw tremendous private innovation on top of our identity rails, on top of our payment rails, on top of our credential rails, and so on. And this is very, very key. India went from about 1,000 startups in 2016 to 100,000 startups today. So India has a very vibrant startup ecosystem who are now combining these digital building blocks to innovate for the market. And that's very key because government alone cannot sustain entire development and innovation cycles in a society, and especially as large and diverse as India. So we need both public and private innovation to come together on it. And so we were inspired, no different from internet or GPS, where a simple set of standards like HTTP and HTML standards powered the internet. GSM standards powered mobile network, right? Mobile network across the world, where the interoperable voice happened, or in the internet, interoperable content happened. And then entire private innovation kicked in to provide what we saw today, seeing today. So DPI thinking is not about solutioning and providing everything. It's about creating the digital building block that unleashes innovation. Just minimum, probably standards and simple building block like identity to drive innovation. So identity was today 1.36 billion covered. It's used 80 million times every day in the country. So universal in everyone uses identity and 9. Up to date, it's 9.6 billion last month. And by the way, our payment infrastructure can also act as a same payment infrastructure is used by people with smartphone, people with feature phone, and people with no phone are also using the same infrastructure at an assisted terminal. And it's very important to create inclusion while innovation is driven. Otherwise, in innovation, at the cost of inclusion is a problem for us. We are also opening up the way we are imagining money. We are also imagining personal data. We believe personal data is going to be the biggest asset for Indian society and for SMEs and individuals. And so we are opening up, and it's already live, our central bank and capital market regulator, insurance regulator came together to open up something called account aggregator network, quite like open banking in UK, but much more open banking on steroids. You can think of that way. It allows tremendous possibilities. Why are we excited about it? It's because it's going to transform credit, logistics, and e-commerce. Commerce in general. And that's very key. And because we are looking for equitable, inclusive, but still driven by private innovation. So that's very, very key for us. And we are driving low-ticket market players. Private market players are combining these data blocks, identity, KYC, account data, digital signature, all combining to reimagine lending in India. And we are also reimagining commerce. And Sujit Nair, who is driving Beacon protocol here at the bottom, it's an open source effort, is right with you today. And I'm sure he'll share more about this, where we are reimagining mobility, urban mobility, commerce, and many other products and services via a network play like the internet, not a platform play. Because platform play creates walled gardens and monopolies. We are creating an internet-like open network play. And it's interestingly, there are 4 pilots that's also starting in Europe as we speak. So Sujit will share some of that. So DPI, the way you want to think about DPI and India's approach, and not only India is doing, now Brazil is doing, Thailand is doing, Philippines is doing, Nigeria is doing, many other countries are actually doing the same approach. It is a 3-layer approach. Create open standards and digital building blocks. Building blocks, not solutions, just building blocks, minimum building blocks, like Lego blocks. Create open governance on top of that, so that privacy, security, accountability, and all that thing is taken care. Grievance handling and all that thing is addressed. But open up that Lego blocks and standards for market and public and private innovation to thrive. If you don't have the 3rd layer, it will be an empty highway with no one driving. Think of that way. So it's important to create highways, rules of driving, and marketplace to create that economy. So we believe digital public infrastructure, or DPI thinking. DPI is not a product. DPI is not a solution. DPI is a way of thinking, like as big as internet. If you think DPI, we can combine public rails and private innovation and still create equity, inclusion, and at least for Indian countries like India, a massive formalization into the formal society, because we have millions and millions of SMEs and 1 billion plus people. So it is a necessary that we do. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Pramod. We're just going to, Pramod, if you will stay with us just for a few minutes. I think it'll be interesting if we can get in some questions, since you have joined us, and we have your attention now. If there are any questions, please raise your hands and we can pass the mic. But I have a question for you to begin with. And you've been talking about DPIs as building blocks. How can we take these building blocks across borders? So we saw a lot of case studies from India. But if these are Lego building blocks like Lego, then we should be able to use these building blocks across the world. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a couple of points. One, there are 2 ways to think about it. One, we are encouraging, as part of our G20 presidency, you saw the Prime Minister and US President's combined statements where DPI thinking has now seeped in, saying it's a way of dealing with digital economies in many, many countries, as much is going digital, with AI even more supercharged. So there is a thinking element of it, an approach, DPI approach, that we are encouraging every country to do, and we are helping, as India, helping many countries to think through this. But when the country make up their mind saying, we want to do DPI, the next question is that, can we also get some of these building blocks in our own country, like a payment building blocks or some mobility or anything else that you are doing? And, quite like other countries, some of the other countries are also doing this. India is not alone, but India's almost all our efforts are actually being open source. Some of them are already open source, like Beacon Protocol, our data empowerment, DEPA protocol. Much of that is actually already open source. It's actually lying on GitHub, where the open source repository, right? Everything is actually there. There is an open source community. So frankly, there is nothing stopping from any country to be able to leverage as much of digital public goods that India has donated and many other countries have donated to create their own DPI journey. They can accelerate that journey through reusing what India has done. Definitely they can reuse.
Well, that's interesting to hear. And if there are any questions, okay, we have one question from Viral Thakkar. He leads sustainability and climate at Deloitte. We'll pass the mic to him.
Thank you.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on. Okay. So one quick question. Would you be able to just spend just a couple of minutes giving us your thoughts on ONDC and its future potential, right? So in some ways, it's the next evolution into expanding, the framework of DPI. But you could also argue, or there are arguments that suggest that it might impact large e-commerce retailers such as Amazon and Flipkart, etc. So just your views on ONDC and the benefits that are sought to be delivered through that.
Yeah. So first of all, before ONDC, let me articulate the current situation, at least in India for now. Digital has not yet penetrated. So if you look at Uber in the taxi mobility, it's not integrated with public transport. It's not integrated with other forms of mobility like electric bikes or three-wheeler taxis, as auto rickshaws, as we call in India. They are not integrated with metro trains or anything of that sort. So it's in silo. Second, it does very little transaction compared to our urban mobility. For example, Delhi Metro, New Delhi, just the metro alone in New Delhi, forget the buses, forget everything else, does more transaction than Uber does across the country. So what we are seeing, and the same thing goes for Amazon. They do in single digit. That's also just B2C commerce. We have B2B commerce and commerce beyond the products, traditional products of goods that Amazon is delivering, much more. But they're all fragmented. So what we see in India and even around the world, I was in Copenhagen 2 weeks back, same thing. They banned Uber and they have a local taxi company and we had to call a number. And we sort of went back in time saying, so I think there are two elements playing out around the world, if you see. One, continued fragmentation of the market, which means you need to create a much larger network effect and not a single platform effect. So single platform has pushed the boundary, but not pushed enough to cover universality. So we need to make sure there is a network thinking, internet-like thinking, rather than a platform-centric thinking. Second, there is also a systemic, like Copenhagen. They are asking the question, how do we deal with monopolies? How do we deal with single company monopolizing the entire digital, transaction environments? So there are two angles to this question, and India has been thinking deep and hard about this. And our open source effort called Beacon Protocol, Sujit is there with you today, and he will probably speak more after me. We have been at it for 4 years, reimagining and inspired by internet and GSM and email, where everything is open, right? Any email server, I can send email to any email. I can call from Android phone to iPhone, from my India network to an AT&T in the US. Interoperability is essential for human scale effects to happen. So ONDC is an attempt at creating an interoperable network to expand the pie. It might look like disruption to current incumbents. It will always look like a disruption because disruption is inevitable and incumbents are almost always in a caught, good to go along. But the idea that we can expand to 1 billion people and expand the market to 1 billion people beyond the 5-6% Amazon might hold or a 2% Uber might hold, 98% is not there. So we can expand the market and everybody wins because you create an internet-like effect. So ONDC is an approach to create such open network for digital commerce in India. But we also have similar effort using backend in Europe, in Paris and Amsterdam and Zurich and so on, where they are reimagining their own networks, unified networks using the open source HTTP-like protocol to create their own network. Nothing to do with India per se, but the idea that the network can create a larger unification and a universalization beyond a single company platform is the idea. It's the idea as big as internet, frankly speaking. So the time has come for us to do, and it's an attempt we will do. And if you look at UPI viral, if you look at UPI, you would have studied. Originally, people felt UPI would disrupt Visa and MasterCard. Frankly, it did not. Credit cards went from 22 million to 60 or 80 million today. So everybody expanded the pie. It was an expansion of the pie game and not a replacement game. It was very important to understand that. Thank you.
Thanks, Pramod.